Good evening.
Good evening again, Council, Mayor Jen. My name is Bill Brand, District 2. I ran for City Council here 3 years ago against Councilman Cagle. Did a lot of walking in the streets. I've been very involved in the community for the last 3 years. And when I see this 750,000 square feet of new commercial recommended by the Planning Commission, or excuse me, the Planning Department, and the 500 and some thousand by the Planning Commission, I mean, I shudder because there's been so much going on in the community that, for instance, there's been 2 citywide surveys in the last, I want to say, 6 years. And the number one concern in both those citywide surveys was overdevelopment in Redondo Beach. And the idea that you're going to put an 80,000 square foot convention center, or even suggest it, and try to support a hotel, timeshares, you know, people don't want it. People just don't want that kind of intensive development down there. Now, they all want an upgrade of the harbor. There's no question about it. And, you know, bringing some kind of reasonable amount of investment in here is, you know, the way to go. But these numbers are just huge. I mean, I think, what is Plaza El Segundo? I think it's 260,000 square feet. And that's a number that, you know, and something that people understand because they drive by it every day, see the impacts of it. And, you know, 750,000 square feet, I don't know if you could, you know, I'm not a zoning expert, but sure seems like you could fit a Plaza El Segundo in there with that kind of number. Anyway, I think the 324,000 is reasonable with no residential. I don't see any reason why you couldn't go down that road and provide an adequate amount of development opportunity for the new investors down there and whoever else. And if there is some project, hard to imagine, that would require more zoning than that, then, you know, it can be taken up at that time. So that's my basic recommendation. View corridors, I mean, geez, somebody even suggested that there isn't a view there and so we shouldn't worry about it. Tell you, man, you drive down Harbor Boulevard, you can see the boats, you can see the masts, you can see the sunset. You know, there's a view there, and you know, it's better than corridors. So anyway, I hope you'll select the lower zoning square footage. I think you won't have to do a new EIR, and as things, you know, come up, you'll be able to reassess them at that point. But I think I'll calm a lot of people down and calm a lot of things down by just going with the lower zoning and be adequate for the new developers.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, anybody else? Come on up. All right, good evening, Jim.
Hi. Jim Light, District 1. City staff has provided you with some responses to my comments on the EIR, and for the most part, their responses are truthful. However, they don't tell the whole truth. For example, the volume lane capacity discussion in their response states that HCM, the Highway Capacity Manual, does allow you to use 1,900 vehicles per hour per lane. That's true, but then in the very next sentence it says that you start with 1,900 vehicles per hour per lane and then reduce for a variety of conditions like bus stops, pedestrian traffic, parking, businesses, all sorts of things that we have right here in Redondo. The Heart of the City calculations did not discount this traffic whatsoever. It used 1,900 vehicles per lane per hour. And they totally ignored the fact that in the same document, which is right here, they got that Santa Monica did a study and came up with results of 1,470 vehicles per lane per hour, and that the national average is 1,682 vehicles per lane per hour. On future baseline projects, they state that SCAG defines the future baselines, which is absolutely true, but what they don't do is allocate it to the intersections. What the HOC study did was allocate it to through traffic, which is not your constraining movements on traffic, which artificially moves the LOS of those intersections better. Finally, as a final example, they say there's differences between the method used in the Heart of the City and the method used by other traffic consultants for the city, the difference between HCM and ICU. And they say the difference is between apples and oranges. Well, that's not quite true. Where there are differences, and there's independent studies that validate this, is that when you're going from one letter grade to another, from B to C, one may predict that it's at a B and the other may predict that it's at a C. However, it's not going to be a way out of bounds prediction where one says it's an A and one says it's an F. So it's not an apples to orange is comparison. So these numbers that have been put out by other studies and by myself do have validity and are not comparing apples to oranges. You can compare the results of HCM to the results of ICU calculations. But don't rely on all those arguments. Look at the EIR itself, and it tells you that it's inadequate for this use. And I quote from Alternative 6, Waterfront only alternative, this alternative would focus trips generated by the proposed project more closely to the waterfront. Therefore, impacts would be of similar or greater magnitude under this alternative than the proposed project. It's telling you it could be worse if you concentrate all the development up towards the waterfront. So I asked the city, where are the calculations for this alternative? And their response to a formal question was that there were none. There was no analysis of the waterfront only alternative. It's saying it could be greater, but it never analyzed what those greater impacts could be. So I did some for myself.
Okay, Jim, we got the time here.
I just need to close up. I did some for myself that demonstrate that it goes to a level of F on one intersection. So the heart of the city, EIR itself is telling you it's inadequate.
Okay.
You should reject this on behalf of the people and do a real EIR.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, anybody else wishing to address this item?